The espionage movie All the Old Knives has a release date of April 8th, 2022 in the US on Amazon Prime Video. In this movie, two CIA agents and ex-lovers, Pine and Thandiwe Newton, are brought back together years after a failed rescue attempt and forced to blur the lines between profession and passion in this deeply riveting tale of global espionage, moral dilemma, and deadly betrayal. And today, Tom and I are excited to have on our show the director of the film All the Old Knives, Janus Metz, and the screenwriter and also the author of the novel of the same name, Olen Steinhauer. Janus and Olen, welcome to our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies.
Thanks for having us.
All right. First of all, we've been able to screen the movie, and we will report on that in another episode very soon, but we wanted to get this episode out as soon as possible.
And since we're going to be releasing this interview before the movie is actually available, there's like a couple days before, we're going to try to keep this no spoilers, not give anything big away. I mean, we've got to talk a little bit about the plot, but we want to make sure that we're not giving away anything big here because we want people to experience it while they watch the movie.
Great. Agreed.
Right. All right, Olen, so tell us, how did you get the title All the Old Knives? We know there's a quote, all the old knives that have rusted in my back, I drive in yours, from Phaedrus, I think, right?
Yeah.
Did this have something to do with it? And if so, how did the title inspire the story? Now, again, without giving too much away here.
Well, the title didn't inspire the story.
Okay.
The title came later when I was knocking around for something. I'm very bad with titles. This is one of the few cases where it worked out pretty well. I mean, to me, the quote's about revenge. And to me, there's a subtext of revenge in the story, very much. Though the story itself, as I admit in the novel, was inspired by Song of Lunch. This is, let's say, Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman doing this wonderful thing I saw on PBS. And randomly, I was living in California, turned on the TV, and I saw Alan Rickman walking into a room, and I was like, what's this? And I sat and I watched it, and I was completely mesmerized for the next hour. And I thought, well, this is great, but I wonder if I could write a spy story, set with two people over a table like this. Could I achieve the same sort of drama, intense drama? And then I promptly forgot about it because I was already writing another novel, and I was in the weeds on that. And then a year later, this thought came back to me, and I was in Serbia with my wife, and we were staying in her father's apartment, and it was very hot. There was no air conditioning. And so I just sat down and I thought, okay, well, I have nothing to do. I don't want to go outside. And I just started writing. And we were there for like a month. And at the end of that month, I was done, which is wickedly fast for me. Usually it takes me a year or so to write a book.
Wow.
And it was sort of the unconscious had just sort of been working on this without me being aware. And it poured out. And I thought, well, that's too fast. This can't be good. So I set it aside for a month, and I came back, and essentially I was just changing commas at that point. It was actually done. Wow. So that's never happened to me before. It'll probably never happen again. And really it all came from that PBS movie. And I lucked out.
Yeah.
Well, now you say it's a PBS movie. I
saw it on PBS.
Yeah, I watched it on Amazon Prime the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So, like this movie, All the Old Knives is coming out on Amazon Prime. You can see the Song of Lunch on Amazon Prime as well. And it was interesting to me to watch that movie, and I could see, especially at the table, the way you did the toasts and stuff like that was like there was a lot of inspiration here from that part of the movie, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Did you get that kind of inspiration from it, Janus?
Yes, I did. Oh yeah.
Janus, yeah.
Well, I didn't have to because you wrote it. So, it was in the script.
Yeah, but you didn't have to shoot that.
I saw the film, and it was, the tension between the two, the sort of the love lost, or the way they meet was obviously great to see the film. I mean, it was, Alan Rickman is a much kind of sadder character off the bat in Song of Lunch than the way Chris Pine plays Henry Pelham. And I think it's important for the spy movie to not kind of go in the direction of what Alan Rickman did for Song of Lunch.
Absolutely. You got to keep your wits about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Olen, you write this. Then, Janus, how did you get involved in making it a movie? How's that process work?
Well, I was presented with the script. I believe it was all the way back in 2018, and I liked the story. I'd never read anything like that. I don't believe I'd ever seen a spy movie that was set around the dinner table in a restaurant for 50% of the time, and then which is essentially an interrogation scene, right? So I love that idea, and what I particularly liked was the kind of the character stories that underpinned it, and what then turns out, obviously, which I can say because we know from the start of the film, is a tragical love story. And in the way that these two stories were interweaved, I thought was really smart and really exciting. And from a director's point of view, I also just like the fact that it's you're shooting. 50% of the movie is a conversation over a dinner table. It's essentially a play, right? It's a two-hander. It's a theater. I thought that was cool. Chris Pine was already attached to the movie at this point. There'd been a previous attempt at getting the movie up and running, which had been unsuccessful. And I thought Chris was really exciting as Henry Pelham, because he's on the one hand very charismatic and charming and good looking and someone you could easily fall in love with. But he also, if you watch Chris's sort of work in smaller independent movies like Hell or High Water, Z for Zachariah, films like that, he's a terrific dramatic actor, and he has a very dark streak to him. And I thought that ambivalence was very important for the Henry Pelham character.
Yeah, and he really, when you looked at him in the scenes, his face really does exactly what you're saying there, Janus. It shows that depth and that edge where you're wondering, what's going on?
He's a very ambivalent character, right? And he plays it with such minimalistic finesse. Everything about this movie, directing this movie, was about the slightest shake of the hand, the slightest twitch of the eye, because these are like the best liars you could probably ever come across. Their whole, spycraft is with them at that table across from each other, and we have to disentangle the story through them and through this conversation. We never know who has the upper hand, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that was, to me, just ultimately, very exciting to go down that road.
And one thing I liked is it seemed like the upper hand, there were little breadcrumbs, I guess I'll call it, along the way to kind of give you've got to really pay attention, because I've now watched the movie 3 times to kind of really get it. And there's little breadcrumbs along the way, but you've got to really be paying attention to be able to see them.
Yeah, I think it's a movie that will work differently on every time you watch it.
Yes,
and it will give away. There's a lot of Easter eggs or breadcrumbs in there that you might not see the first time.
Yes.
You're gonna enjoy. I think you enjoy just the thrill of it on a first watch, and it's exciting, and it's a sort of twist and turn, whodunit sort of story. But I think on a second and a third watch, the characters and the intricacies of every little kind of hint that they give is going to play stronger.
Yes, the depth of the characters are really strong. Yeah,
I think it's a testament to both of the actors and to Janus's direction that those nuances sort of add up the way they do. So much attention was paid to each sort of character move in that. So I wasn't there for the direction or anything, but I think I wrote Janus when I saw like the first cut that I saw, and was just ecstatic by the way it looked and the way the story progressed. It worked so beautifully.
So now you, on the screenwriting part of it, taking the novel and moving it to a screenwritten, a script, some changes happen between those two things. So in the book, the airplane doesn't really come to the forefront until a little later into the novel.
Right, yeah.
But in the movie, I loved the way that opened. That first 45 seconds with Flight 127 and the camera work in there and the feeling of chaos, and it really made you uneasy. So I guess the question is, who made the decision to move it to the front?
Janus, I actually don't remember. It was you?
It was pretty much me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty much you. Yeah.
No, but look, it was foreshadowed already at the script level, but I knew that it was something, and my editors were very also kind of upfront with that decision, saying, we've got to add pressure on the situation.
Yeah.
For audiences
when you
to
start
lean
with
in,
it,
because otherwise you lose your concentration. It's very difficult to kind of listen in to people having a conversation and very subtle hints of the story that is, Olen's masterful writing of the whole spycraft of it. But you got to understand what's at stake. And this traumatizing event that 127 was, which changed everything for everyone in the story. Yeah. Not just Henry and Celia, played by Chris and Thandiwe, but also, Vic, who's the boss of the office, played masterfully by Lawrence Fishburne, and Bill, who's just burned out agent, played brilliantly by Jonathan Pryce. They're all traumatized.
Yes.
By it, we can't spoil the plot. So I was going to go down the road with that. But this was really important to say. It's a hijacking on a plane. There's 120 people that died. This we're told at the front of the film, so I can say that without spoiling the plot. Yeah. This is the event where everything went wrong. Yeah. And now they have to new information's come up, and they got to go down the rabbit hole and find out who leaked the information that caused this to go wrong. And that's obviously the pain that they're carrying into the story. That's what make us hook as viewers on the plot, but also on Henry and Celia as characters.
Yeah, that's great. Now,
I thought that was just so. The closeness of the shots, it was a little shaky as it was because, again, bringing that chaos. Well, it's just a phenomenal way to start this.
Yeah. Well, it's representing the hijackers filming themselves, with the idea that they're filming themselves with an iPhone. Mm-hmm. So what you're feeling is a very subjective kind of, representation of their sort of video to put on YouTube for everyone to see. Yes. This is what happens when you don't do what we tell you to do.
Really,
even to the effect that in the sound design we added the guy breathing, so you really had a closeness to the person who holds the phone, right?
Yeah. So Janus, we've seen the movie a few times now and everything, and we think it's something very clever that perhaps you could talk about here. We see a situation where the two main characters, Henry Pelham, like you said, played by Chris Pine, and Celia Harrison, played great by Thandiwe Newton. They're in the restaurant in Carmel by the Sea in California, in the U.S., and they're discussing things like we talked about, and we see all of the action through flawlessly executed flashbacks. And to me, it was like a circle with them in the middle of it, and then lines shooting out of the circle to the flashbacks, and then back into the circle to the present, which worked brilliantly. It was terrific.
Yeah. And I thought it was a really great way to take, because the novel is written where it's here's Henry's point of view for part of the story, and then here's Celia's part of the view for part of the story. And by doing the flashbacks, you're able to intertwine that. I thought that was cool. Yeah.
So tell us how that came to be and how important that is to the storyline, and really how difficult that was to implement.
Well, I mean, it was, first of all, it was all Olen's script. That's the structure of the script. They talk from their conversations, we jump back and we get a little piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
And we don't always know whose perspective, it's obviously part of the fun is whose perspective are we in? Who's remembering this?
Yeah.
And are we being told the entire truth about that situation? And can we come back and revisit it again from another perspective? So this is the beauty of what Olen wrote.
Yes.
I think my job in that sense was to strengthen that so that every time you have a scene, you see how that scene just reverberates into a close-up of a character remembering. So it is like, we worked in the editing room, we worked a lot with the idea of trauma. And this was probably already, whether consciously or not, part of Olen's way of, thinking about these characters. But something that's changed your life so detrimentally, that's, destroyed everything, and you have to revisit that. That's painful, and you want that pain to be tangible.
Mm-hmm.
So, how we did, obviously we had all kinds of visual strategies on how to kind of go from one, from a flashback to a close-up, or from a wide and into something. And you wake up with Henry and Celia in the morning, and they're in love, and, the sort of the sweetness but also the pain of remembering a lost love. How do you visualize that?
Yes.
There's a way that we use light, and a way that we kind of are close with them as they look at each other, and the way he looks at her, because that's his memory of the love that they shared in the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cut to the restaurant, and this was all, laid out in Olen's script. We cut to her, and we see her again with that same, how he used to remember her. And suddenly we're like, oh, this was the love of his life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a great segue, because Olen, we wanted to ask you too, because I'm sure Janus, would have some comments on this from the director's point of view. You often refer to yourself as an espionage novelist, and you've written a number of novels like The Cairo Affair, The Bridge of Sighs, The Middleman, The American Spy, and now all the Old Knives. We think it's kind of uncommon to have the author of the story also be the screenwriter for the motion picture that is based upon a novel. It's happened a few times. Agatha Christie, I think, dabbled in that a little bit and so on, but I think it's unusual, and it has to be a tremendous advantage. So how unusual is it, number one, and what are the many advantages for the author, for the director, for the filmmakers in general, and really for the viewing audience to have this happen?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how common or uncommon it is, but I think this had come up in a previous interview, so it must be pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
But for me, our producers, when they first wanted to get the rights to the book, they were very open to me writing it, and I was interested. Honestly, this is the first script I ever wrote from beginning to end. And I made a few stabs at trying to adapt The Tourist, and I just kind of wandered. It wasn't working out. And with this one, I was like, okay, I really want to write this. They said, yeah, go ahead. And a lot of producers wouldn't do that. This was Nick Wexler, Steve Schwartz, and Paula Mae Schwartz. And they're a great team to work with, generally, but they're also open to just trying whatever the author is interested in doing. So luckily it worked out. And I don't know that, Janus could probably speak better to this. I'm not 100% sure that the author of a book writing the screenplay is necessarily the best idea, because you get so tied. There's a reason why you wrote the words in the book. And so you often feel this need, I can't get rid of that. Well, actually you can. And a lot of times the film's better for it. The more you cut is often works out best.
It's an interesting perspective.
Well, I can comment on it. I've tried to collaborate with novelists on other scripts, and it doesn't always work for some of the reasons that Olen said. It is two very different ways of writing a novel. Not that I've ever written a novel, but script writing is a very particular discipline. It has a mathematical structure to it which is about storytelling, about sequencing and stuff like that. And I, we had, Olen and I sort of collaborated from him having written a great script to us having a script that we could, that was the best perfect script in my opinion to shoot. We had a great sort of, 3 to 4 month collaboration, also involving the actors and getting the actors in to read some of the scenes and, mining whatever we could of, information from that and then strengthening what we had. And, in that process, we took out quite a few pages already because there's also stuff that's like, well, you don't even have to say that. That's just a look.
Yeah.
You get it visually instead of in words.
Dramatically stronger if you put that scene before that, or here we're coming back to something which we already, we're past that point. The drama's intensified now. We can't go into a long dialogue about so-and-so.
Yeah.
And there's, that stuff that comes with experience, of filmmaking and screenwriting. And most novelists don't have that experience. They haven't walked the kilometers yet. Olen's obviously, super talented in that direction. It was, it was such a great process.
Yeah, no,
and I think, you ask Chris Pine, he says Olen's original script is one of the best 3 scripts he's ever read.
Wow.
So we already had a good starting point,
It's nice to start with a solid script.
So, Olen, would you do it again?
When? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Hey, Janus, now, when we heard you say in a couple of interviews that you kind of look at a movie through a prism, and in bringing a writer's words to screen can be daunting. So when we spoke with Roberto Schaefer, who was the director of photography for one of the James Bond movies, Quantum of Solace, he told us that sometimes the director wanted a very specific shot of a scene. And sometimes the director would just leave it up to the director of photography and his teams to come up with the shot, second units, and all that kind of stuff. So how much were you involved in selecting specific shots, and for what scenes, and how was that dynamic?
Well, I'm very involved with almost every single detail of all my movies. But I have to say, if you go and shoot a James Bond movie, there's a lot of stuff you just by nature cannot be involved with because there's a lot, you don't want to shoot the car driving around the corner for the 17th time to get it right, So there's a lot of stuff. You just assemble piles of shots, that you can go and edit afterwards, and you place, 100 cameras on something to get it, to get that, beautiful shot of that explosion right with the actor's head behind it or something. So, and stunts, obviously, you don't always deal with those. But with this movie, I mean, for me, part of the sort of fabric of filmmaking is choosing your collaborations. And, the DOP is, the most important, without kind of taking anything away from production design and hair and costume and makeup and producers and it's like a big machine. It has to work. But the DOP obviously is, left, right, and center for everything you're doing. And I work very closely with my DOPs in development and in prep to plan the scenes, to plan the types of shots. We're not necessarily like, it has to be a 50 mil, as opposed to a 40 mil, or it has to be, but we know what the cinematography has to deliver. What is the emotion that the cinematography has to deliver here? And, coming back to some of the questions of how you go back and forth between past and present in this movie, those kind of shots are very, very important for the film to work. And with this film, loneliness, loss, longing, mistrust, paranoia, how do you create those feelings in your cinematography? That's the kind of conversations you want to have with your DOP. And then you obviously you always want someone to be better than you. If I'm playing in a band and I hire a guitar player and I can play that guitar better myself, it's not worth it. You obviously hire the best DOP for the job, and you're gonna get a lot of like presence and, things that you could not even, you might have an idea, and then she says, well, if you're going with that, what about, pushing a little further into this kind of image? And suddenly you have a very inspiring conversation. And with the way I run my set, to sometimes to the frustration of my producers and crew, is we keep being alert to what's going on the day. We might have a plan, but we might change the plan completely because we realize, oh, the life of the scene is over here. It's not, in the shot we thought it was going to be. That's exciting. Because the life, and I guess that's also my background as a documentarian. I look at what's going on and I'm like, whoa, this is where the explosion is. This is where we want to be. You can't do that too much because then you're going to be wasting everyone's time, and you're going to do overtime every day, and the movie's going to blow its budget, and people are going to get angry with you. So you have to run a ship with 200 crew members, right? But filmmaking to me is creating the opportunities for life and emotions to unfold themselves in front of the camera, and to be able to place the camera where the camera sees that in the best possible way, communicates the story in the best possible way, not in sort of a bookkeeping one-to-one kind of truth necessarily, but is the feeling of loneliness better portrayed as like a high angle shot with just a small character in the screen, or is it the eyes of, close up the eyes of the character thinking about, what we just saw? Kind of situation.
Yeah, that kind of collaboration has to produce a much higher quality product. So that's terrific to hear that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in with that because you're talking about getting this shot or whatever, but you filmed this during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, which I know changed a lot of things for a lot of industries, in your industry. And one of the things, I'm going to go back to that opening shot in the plane, is how did you shoot that during COVID restrictions? And what overall did COVID do in terms of what you had to do? And then were there changes, Olen, that you needed to make because you had to rework something because of restrictions?
Well, should I maybe let me go first?
You start. You go first. Yeah.
Because I know there's a lot of questions here, but it was very, interesting to shoot during the pandemic for various reasons. Partly because we had to build a lot of the stuff that you see. A lot of 80% of this movie is shot on a studio, and I would argue that you can't see that. That we move seamlessly, inside and outside of studio spaces, and we were able to construct a world that reads completely like you're in, the actual places. But it is a studio build, and for that, part of that was due to COVID, so we could control the airflow, we could control how many people were there, we could, we're not out amongst, real, other people. We have everything contained in our own bubble, and we can test everyone, and we can have a system of like, blue lanyards are on set, red lanyards leave the set, air out the set, and no one allowed near the actors apart from the dedicated people that had to be near the actors, who were obviously the only ones that weren't wearing masks and visors. So coming back to the plane, it was actually one of the scenes that were the trickiest because of the number of people we had to put on that plane to make it believable. So that we have to believe that there's 120 something people on a plane, and we were allowed to have, I believe, 30 extras.
Wow.
So we had to replicate and shoot and digitally replicate. A lot of the people you see on that plane are not there. Those are computer inserts. And this was a big job of CGI.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
You cannot see it. I swear to God,
that explains a lot of how you got away with it. Okay.
And we had to do quite sort of detailed planning on, how much you can see in an image to not reveal too much. Obviously, because once you start revealing empty seats, that's going to be an expensive shot because you're going to have to place, the CGI, the VFX is always what you want to try and stay clear of in terms of your budget, because that's the expensive stuff. So you really angle off things, and then you have one wide or two wide to sell it. And then when we did a lot of like clever stuff and like hiding the background with the character in front of, so you can't see that it's empty right behind him. And then we put a few people on the side, etc. So this was a big planning job. And obviously it's shot on a, when you do this kind of stuff, you have, I mean, there are companies that whose job is to deliver plane cabins that you put in a studio and then you shoot, and then you can open the one side of the cabin. So you just have half a plane, or, you know, you can build another module onto the back, but you take that module off, and, you know, so a lot, and you can take the roof off and whatever. And then you combine that with an exterior shot, which is obviously shot in an airport outside of London that's dedicated for film shoots. And, you know, a little bit of smart editing, good sound design.
It's all movie magic to the viewer.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
And Olen, did you have to change anything because of it?
I don't remember. Maybe, I don't think so. No, they took care of it all. Obviously, I didn't even know about the fake people. So yeah, that was movie magic. You know, ironically, without COVID, I'm not sure everybody's schedules would have cleared up, because this thing got going. You know, Amazon came on and we were good to go. And I think part of it was because of COVID, you know, Chris's schedule cleared up and Thandiwe's, because other things were closing down. So in a way, this kind of actually helped us. Isn't that right? Yeah,
it is true. I mean, yes, no, it's true. I mean, everyone was very excited about this movie, but it was difficult to you know, slot it in between, you know, Chris Pine was attached to these like mega monstrous big movies, and you know, we could go off the back of some big production and say in a year, and then who knows what happens in a year, and then suddenly all those movies got shut down, because you can't suddenly travel between Rome, Paris, New York, and Addis Ababa to shoot a film. And here's our movie. We can shoot 80% of it on a studio in London and go movie.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool. All right. I want to shift to some of the themes that are here. Again, trying not to give things away here, but Olen, there are two themes here I want to talk about. One is the family and children. You look at that, I think, a couple different ways. And the importance of, especially to Celia, the importance of family and the protection of children. You know, she's a protective mother. But then there was also this whole thing about trust throughout. Yeah. And they kind of interwove. And I just wanted to, if you kind of talk a little bit about what you were doing there. Yeah,
I mean, when I wrote the book, I had been a parent just for a few years. And that was actually, it's sort of I think for most people this is true, but it was life-changing. This idea that there was something that was more important than you know, that you would die for, that you would maybe kill for. And a lot of that went into Celia's character. And I think, I don't know if it's maybe more laid out in the book, this idea that Henry doesn't have children. He's still in that selfish mode. And so she tries to communicate and almost to warn him in the book ahead of time. Look, you know, I would do anything for my kids. And that right there was an important theme in it. And then I'm not sure how trust sort of interweaves with that, though. There is, I mean, it's just part and parcel for spy fiction of any kind. It's the central thing is trust, or lack of trust, and the games that we play against each other. But to me, like the motor for Celia are her kids. She has a marriage that is, well, maybe it's loveless, maybe not. Maybe she just used her husband to get out of Vienna those years ago. But then she ended up with something unexpectedly that sort of changed her whole view of everything. And a lot of that was my just still being stunned by that idea that it had happened to me. Yeah. And she was my way of communicating that.
Okay,
that's
cool.
Great. Yeah. We love some of the camera angles too, and you could both speak to this. I mean, the lighting, the texture of the scenes and the color palette and the sound effects, all of that working together. So tell us a little bit about what went into selecting all of what we see on the screen from the director's point of view and really from the screenwriter's perspective as well.
Janus?
Well, I mean, first of all, I thought this movie is a lot about mistrust and paranoia and people in this office, you know, kind of keeping an eye on each other and the sort of whodunit aspect of it. So it was important to also for the production design to have an office where, you know, you can kind of look through blinds into an office and see someone doing something slightly dodgy. And we put a little bit of blame on a character like that. And it's part of the fun of it, you know, how do you play the office? But it's also part of the tense atmosphere that, you know,
yes,
exists in this office. Because there is a point where they all know. I like to think, because they're so smart, you know, that there's something wrong, you know.
Yes.
So we had to play that in looks and gazes and sort of camera angles that was slightly obscured behind stuff, etc. So that was one principle. And then another principle was, you know, this idea of, you know, two star-crossed lovers, a kind of Romeo and Juliet story where it goes terribly wrong. And then they meet again after 8 years and they have to figure out the ins and outs. And we have to fall in love with them and believe in them and somehow go on that journey with them. And this way of, you know, I think it's one place where what we put in the book actually put in the film actually diverts from what's in Olen's book. Because as I remember your book, Olen, they meet in a quaint little sort of Italian restaurant. It's inspired by some of them. And I wanted to make it an epic sort of, they meet at the end of the world, you know, physically, emotionally, in terms of their love story. Now the masks have to come off and we have to have closure. So I wanted this restaurant cringed out on a rock, you know, with the Atlantic Ocean sweeping into it, and you know, this feeling that this is where it ends, and we have. This is also a studio construct. I mean, we shot a real sunset over in Northern California, and then we projected that up onto a big screen as a backdrop in a studio, so we could control the light. It also gives this feel, you know, the sun sets on their relationship. And in the end, it's very, it's completely dark, and we go into like a film noir type of storytelling and visuality. So there was going back to what I talked about, your collaboration with the DOP. This is really something Charlotte came up with. You know, that, you know, we're quite restrained visually because we're talking about a conversation over a dinner. I mean, we can do close-ups, we can do two shots, we can do over shoulders, we looked at a lot of Bergman movies to find out how do we make the most kind of tense close-ups and two-shot situation, because Bergman movies are always about relationships between people and the tensions between them. So we took from there, and then we had always like, okay, when the camera moves around them, it's like a whirlpool of the events that happen, you know, earlier, and we spin into that as they spin, you know. And then, you know, Charlotte had this idea of making the journey in the restaurant visually a light journey. So when they meet, it's the end of the day. It's a beautiful sunset. They're reminiscing their relationship. You know, we remember how beautiful it was. And then as it gets darker and darker, it gets more and more ugly. You know, and and you know, talking about script structure, that is those turning points in the story are visually structured to be in specific places. When they start talking about what went wrong, the sun goes down. The restaurant turns from pink, red, beautiful, light golden colors to, you know, cold blue. Suddenly, woof.
Yes.
So, you know, some of these things, obviously, you don't necessarily notice them as a viewer, but I would argue that you feel them if we do our job right.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think another thing that added to it was the score, right? So this was what, John Ekstrom and Rebecca Carrier, I think, did the score on this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in your face, but it was there just, I think, helping create that tension.
Yeah. I mean, there's various ways you can address a movie like this. And I think it's the same as a little bit of the same what we're talking about with cinematography. You have like something you need to tell. Okay, close up, she says this, close up, he says that, etc. But you have a different kind of approach to it where we try to communicate or make it you make the theme of the film tangible to audiences, and score is a lot about that to me. So we could have gone for a kind of very straight down the middle, dramatic, suspense driven, tense score for this, and that exists too, and it has to exist in the same way as we have to know that the hijacking on the plane was, you know, detrimental and dangerous and, you know, traumatized everyone forever, etc. So you have that very dark score on the one hand, but you also have a very melancholic, beautiful score, where it's almost like, you know, I like to use the phrase with the composers, I want to hear the angels crying over these two people and what happened to them.
That's good.
And that takes the movie into a different type of experience. You're suddenly going from drama and action, which is kind of, in my opinion, your sort of middle of the road spy movie, action movie, into a character-driven sort of existential movie. And I always, I mean, I made a movie before this about two tennis players, Björn Borg and John McEnroe. Right. We kind of did the same thing, you know. It's like, so this isn't really a movie about who wins the Wimbledon. It's a movie about how lonely these two people are. And the music has to help us tell that story.
And I think it does a very good job.
Yeah. Olen, did you have something you'd?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of, you know, you guys did an amazing job on the Office, you know, the Office in Vienna. I didn't have a clear picture. All I wanted was whatever pictures I had were kind of from spy films already. And I just was hoping that Janus wouldn't do that. And he did. He ended up coming up with you guys came up with a beautiful set. But when I had originally watched Song of Lunch, and, you know, a year later, you know, was inspired to write this, I was living in Carmel, California. So that setting was actually important to me because it was a place that, you know, we lived less than a year there, my family and I. And while it's gorgeous, there's something sort of cold under the surface when you're living there. I think if you go there for vacation, it's fine. But if you're living there, people have their lives. Their lives are already regimented, and they're living their best lives. So it's hard to crack into that and become sort of socially connected. And so I was using Carmel sort of as an ironic backdrop, this sort of gorgeous place, but something very cold is happening here, you know, in the story, as well as the beauty of the love. So while I didn't like Janus said, the restaurant was actually like a small restaurant right in the center of town because I'd been to those restaurants. But the move to putting it on the edge of the world I think it's brilliant. And it really plays to the themes.
Also had to say, if you wanted to kill someone being a CIA agent, you wouldn't do it in the middle of town. So that was one of my ideas. It's a very good point. Hold on. Something here.
Okay, I wanted to then ask about another filming location, because Jonathan Pryce, who I absolutely love, you've got that scene where he's on the phone in London, it's raining, he's in front of that print shop on Carey Street. Now, was that studio, or did you actually film that on location? And if so, why did you choose that location?
That was one of the few places that we shot on location. I mean, originally before COVID, we contemplated the idea of shooting this film, I believe, in was it Budapest or somewhere like that? And it was just to get some of those like beautiful locations you can get there, and double Budapest for Vienna. You know, this is obviously all a budget question. Why not shoot it in Vienna? Because it's cheaper to shoot it in Budapest, and you can get Budapest to look great, etc. But one of the things we couldn't find in Budapest was a good London pub.
Yeah.
So we went to London, and we said, okay, we got to go shoot the pub. You know, there's loads of pubs there. But it turned out, ironically, to be the location we had the hardest time finding. Because first of all, you can't shoot in central London in the business district because of regulations that, you know, you can only shoot on weekends. And so there were some kind of rules there. So a lot of opportunities were shut down. Secondly, a lot of the pubs there have been kind of regentrified, or they don't look like cool old pubs anymore. They look a little boring and sort of, you know. But we found this one pub which was beautiful, and it was small. So we were worried about that, because often you want the place to be a little bigger so you can get your cameras in, etc. But it was just so gorgeous. It was right across from these, like, you know, I'm not necessarily a big fan of like, oh, let's shoot black fences, white buildings, and red phone booths and double-decker buses because we're in London. But that stuff was literally right there, you know, and we could walk down the street around the corner and make them walk across, you know, a pedestrian crossing. And you just, you know, you're telling people London right away without making it too much of a cliche. And there's nothing like, I mean, the sort of the texture of dark wood and stained glass windows, and, you know, it's raining a little bit outside. I mean, what's not to love? That's just a spy movie.
With the texture of Jonathan Pryce at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Pryce, his face is just a landscape of external exploration.
He was brilliant in that scene. That was a great scene.
But look, I've wanted to work with Jonathan Pryce for so many years, and I think when I watched him in The Two Popes across from Anthony Hopkins, who won an Academy Award for that, I just thought Jonathan Pryce was like a revelation. I've not stopped raving about him. And when I finally found a script that had a role that where I could put Jonathan Pryce's name on it, that was like, it was the first thing I wanted to do. And fortunately, he really liked the script and liked the character.
Yeah, we wanted to ask about that. We thought the casting was spot on. The supporting cast, the main characters, everything, just beautiful casting. And we wanted to ask you how that went. How did you go about it? So we just heard a little bit about your perspective of Jonathan Pryce and so on. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, the dynamics of the cast, because that often plays a role in how things unfold in a film and how things go, and really from both perspectives, from the screenwriter's perspective as well as the director's perspective on this, because we really thought it was brilliant casting.
Well, it was a great spy cast too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Stuff.
No, this is more Janus's wheelhouse, but Chris Pine had come on relatively early, some years ago, and he was fully committed to this role, to the point that, you know, as it languished and we couldn't get it going for various, you know, production reasons. He just stayed on it, and he was loyal to it for a very long time. And Janus, you take over.
Yeah, no, Chris was very committed, and you know, obviously as a director, you come onto a movie, there's already a star attached. You got to find out whether you like that idea, because you're the, you know, it's usually the other way around, or not always with how things are these days. But with Chris, I mean, I had a brief conversation with the producers after I first read the script. I told them I liked it, why I liked it. You know, it was it was a Zoom call. I remember I was in Copenhagen, where I'm based, and there were like 6 producers in a room somewhere over in LA on a conference call. And next thing is they've set me up in a meeting with Chris, and I was deep in the middle of doing another project. So, you know, but Chris and I just really, you know, hit it off and found a great sort of understanding with each other about what this movie could be. And from that moment, it was, you know, we needed to go and find our Celia. And I remember there was a few names that was being discussed. And we started talking about Thandiwe Newton for various reasons. Part of it was, you know, she's mature, she's a mother, and some of those ideas, you know, I think the sort of the sentiment of motherhood is very important to Celia as a character. And she always, I think she has really the range of playing sort of a younger, more innocent version of the older, mature version of Celia that we're seeing. And I remember Chris really liking the idea, and he said, I think she's a very soulful actress. And that just resonated with me, you know, because Celia could very easily come across as a cold sort of femme fatale, slightly stereotype idea of like a spy woman. You know, we know those characters from the genre, right? Yeah. And I think she presented a real heart for the Celia character that was important to make the story work. And on the first conversation, she was like all over it, and she, read the novel. No, she hadn't read the novel, but she'd read the script, and she went on to read the novel. And she was already coming from inside the character, and that was a great conversation. Felt very organic. Then the idea of the two of them together was exciting. Yeah. They loved the idea of the two of them together as well. So that's obviously a good start of like the chemistry. Yep. With the character Victor Wallinger, who's the boss of the CIA office in Vienna, I knew we needed someone who could really command the room with the greatest possible authority.
You did well with that.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne in, he's just a double bass of a character, right? And he's such a powerful instrument.
Fills the room.
And that was, it was such a gift to the film. And you working with someone like Jonathan, who's like, he's an embodiment of film history. The guy was in Apocalypse Now. It's like, it's like a library of experience. And we had some great conversations early on. We both loved The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And that was like a reference for us, coming back to that movie. I also, let's put it out there. I also really liked the idea of not having an all-white cast. I wanted to diversify in front of the camera. I thought that was very important, not just for the political climate we're in today, which I fully sort of support and admire, but also because that's the reality of the CIA.
Right,
that's true.
Yeah.
They come from all walks of life, and it's important to have a diverse group of people in the CIA because they have to fit in,
Yes, yeah.
Exactly. The time of the sort of the Ivy League educated tweed jacket wearing spy is over. These are people with real grit and life experience and field experience. And then, I've already said all the praise in the world for Jonathan Pryce. So these were the core ideas. And then, building around that, obviously going from the sort of idea of authenticity and realism that Olen's script brought into this. I remember one change we did from the book to the script, which is actually had to do with casting, was the role of Layla, who in the book is like, she's an old sort of seasoned woman, a white woman, I believe, in the book, right, Olen?
Yeah, I don't remember her ethnicity, but yeah, no, she was older. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought we needed, it was interesting to have someone with specific knowledge of the Middle Eastern regions in the story as a kind of like mediator and someone who had more at stake also. Maybe because, Layla, the character, she probably has, she has family down there, and it was really interesting because then you're working with this actress Art Kamel, who came in to play Layla. She hadn't done a lot of big stuff before. This is a big role for her. Yeah. But she's from Saudi Arabia. She's related to what's it? How do you pronounce it? Khashoggi. Yeah, that's like his cousin, her cousin.
Wow.
So all those things were very real to her. She had a very real connection with these issues.
Very authentic. When you see, anytime she spoke, you just believed it. You were right into the character. You just believed it. So that was good. Were there times when a cast member had an idea for a scene maybe that was a little different than what you were going to do, and that maybe you entertained that idea and actually incorporated it from both perspectives?
All the way through. Even we did script development based on readings. We changed dialogue, a million times as an effect of readings. And when you're out there on set and you're in a real location and things have a dynamic and act, the bodily presence of the actors does something to the scenes. You might have an idea in your head and then you're like, it's actually much better if you just seated in these two chairs rather than standing over by the window or coming in and out of the door. I remember you had sent me Janus had sent me an email at some point saying, Jonathan Pryce has some notes for a scene he's going to be doing, like to change the emotional tone of it. And,
your first reaction is, well, Jonathan Pryce says it, so yeah, of course. But I don't care what he said. But then, of course, reflected on it, and he was right, and it really sort of heightened the scene. We had talked through a little bit how to fix that up, which you can see on the screen that he, the dialogue works very well for it.
Yeah.
What's great about good actors is they always try to protect their character in a way,
Yeah.
So if you've done the character, sometimes you don't always see it in writing. You might have done the character slight disservice by making him, I don't know, too whingy or too, And so obviously sometimes you can have a very strong vision and you want something and the actor's pushing back and you're like, well, this is how it has to be. And, but I'm much more of a listener because I think you learn, and the story, you keep exploring and interrogating your story from the script writing stage through production, all the way through editing, all the way through sound work, color grading. It's not until you closed every single last step of the film that you can make changes.
That's great. So the dynamic among the actors and among the actors and Olen as the screenwriter and you as the director was very strong and positive and interactive, which probably produces a better product.
I think that was a very collaborative process.
Yeah.
I think the actors were quite surprised that I had the writer sitting in on readings. I don't think they'd ever tried that before. I also have the DOP sitting in on readings because I'm like, well, if you want to, we have to figure out how to shoot this. You have to feel what it is. You can't just say, well, let's be over in that corner shooting a wide and then do a little bit of coverage over here. It's really about, for me, I mean, that's the way I make movies. People make movies in 100 million different ways, but that's how I try to bring life to the material.
Yeah, and the read through was brilliant. I mean, I don't know if I said this before. That it's exactly what Janus is saying. The actors feel their characters and want to protect the depiction throughout, and as a writer, it's very important to hear an actor say, this speech, I don't know, would I say that? Maybe I would just give a look. And it's, growing up, I always thought that actors wanted all the lines. It's completely not true. Not the good actors, at least, and it's usually, and I found this also when I was working on Berlin Station, the better actors would say, do you really need me to say all this? Is there a plot reason why I have to say this? Because if not, I can just let me do that look or say this one word, and I think it'll land better. Yeah.
Sometimes we have like a longing for the subtext of things, right?
Yeah.
When we're writing it, because writing is not experiencing, it's not experiencing it coming through the actors. So you want to write the subtext so the reader can understand, oh, this is really what she's feeling here. But, when the actor does it, that emotion is just there. And maybe, it's much stronger to not, have so many words. You want the right words at the right time.
Yeah.
You're talking about getting the feedback from the actors. Now, something that's newer in production than we used to have, I mean, I guess it started in like 2016, is the concept of the intimacy coordinator. So it's a new thing in production, or relatively new thing in production. So you had an intimacy coordinator on here because you had some scenes that there was some sex and nudity in this movie. How did that shape what you had to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really important sex scene in the film, which is the moment when kind of, our two lead characters kind of come together and cling to each other while the entire world around them is falling apart and give in 100%. And Chris and Thandiwe were always very, very on board with how important the scene was and how important it was to get it right. So we all, the courage to go, really go, how can you say it, do it and do it right was important. And then we had the intimacy coordinator with us. And, that was just a wonderful experience because I think it created, a safe space where you're like, that there's someone here who whose job it is to help you make the scene work with everyone feeling, good about it, and you're not crossing any boundaries. You're not doing anything that people feel, kind of forced to do, or and in many ways it helped the actors to give more, I think.
Okay.
Also because I mean, I know from talking to Pine and Thandiwe about it, they started feeling, oh, this is awkward. Now there's a woman, 50-year-old something woman that has to tell me how to like moan and grind and whatnot and make it. But in the end, they were like, yeah, this is cool. We're all splashing around, and I wasn't, but they were, and the DOP was on the bed, quite without any clothes on, really, I think it was a really, just a really strong and wonderful and deep experience for all of us. And I know that they're very proud of the scene, and they're very happy with how we did it. And, I think honestly, it's like, you have a stunt coordinator when you have to shoot a fight, because you're not fighting for real. Yeah. And you need an intimacy coordinator when you're doing intimate scenes, because you're not doing them for real. And it's just a great tool. I don't understand why it's a new concept, why it hasn't always been like that. It feels like the only right thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to end my thoughts about my overall feelings of watching this movie, because this was, you mentioned the spy who came in from the cold. And this really had that kind of a feel to it. About halfway through, because when I do these things, I watched the movie once without taking any notes, just to kind of get my feel for the movie. And I'm like, I'm watching a novel, right? It was like you were telling this story. There weren't a bunch, spy movies today so often are just, it's all about the next big stunt.
Action and
stuff. And it's all that action. And here it's more about, this is the story. These are the twists that are in here. And it's not about a bunch of big stunts. And I thought that was fabulous. And for me, I really appreciate that kind of a spy story.
Yeah, we love the story and the bringing it to the screen that you guys did, brilliantly bringing it to the screen. And it's not the typical stuff that they do now, all the action stuff and the stunts and everything else. This was really a spy story, and you were drawn into it from the very first seconds. So that was just terrific. Terrific.
That's great to hear. I mean, to me, like the reason why I write, I mean, I enjoy, like an action spy film as much as anybody else. They're a blast. But the reason why I write the genre I do is never about that. It's always about, it's sort of more existential questions and questions of how can we know other people? How can I know my wife if her thoughts are stuck up here? All I can know is what she chooses to communicate to me. And we do this with everybody. We always look for the subtext in what other people are doing. And to me, spying is just, it's like a metaphor for everyday life in a lot of ways. And also the question of, if you risk your life or risk your sanity in some way for a country's interests, is that really a choice that most people would willingly do? And what kind of person makes that choice to devote themselves to that? Many times they're looking for something that they didn't get in childhood, say, or as an adult. And to me, those are the most interesting sorts of questions. And luckily the genre has allowed me to sort of pursue that for many years.
Yeah, I read something, and this quote was associated with you. While our expectations for the future are all that really keep us going, the failure of those expectations is the source of all our sadness, which is really kind of the stuff you're saying now with looking at the existential things and the impacts of all of that around you. I mean, that kind of sums up what you're doing. That's
I suppose. Yeah.
Sums up all the old knives in many ways.
Yeah. I mean,
I've never heard that quote before. It's very well put.
Yeah, I thought that was terrific. That was great. So This has been fun, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just absolutely terrific.
Yeah.
You guys did a fabulous job. I want to thank you so much to our special guests, Janus Metz and Olen Steinhauer, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
All the best.
All the best to you.
That's a wrap. This has been Dan Silvestri
And Tom Pizzato.
with SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Tell your friends about our show through your own social media posts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Instagram too. And subscribe right now. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it.